Good morning, everyone. So today we're going to talk about validation, and most importantly, we are going to talk about one of my favorite library, hence the two-time submission, which is Zod. So first of all, I'm Thomas. I'm a consultant here at Zenika. I'm specialized in front-end development, and I love to talk about performance and accessibility. Outside of work, I like wildlife photography and scuba diving as well. So for today's agenda, we are going to talk about validation, really what is validation. Then we'll try to use native validation, which is plain and simple HTML. Then we'll try to build our own custom validation using JavaScript, TypeScript, whatever we need. And then we'll move on to the main topic today, which is Zod, which is a library made for validation. If I have enough time, we'll try to see how we can integrate Zod with forms in React. So it works with other frameworks, but I'll focus on React today. So first of all, validation. What is validation? So validation is important to be sure that user or any external input are filled. So when we want to process and read data, we need to read some user input. Maybe it's from a web application, maybe it's from a file. We need to be sure that everything has been filled correctly. And when we process the data, we need to be sure that every field is there before we access it, before we transform it, before we store it back in the database. And sometimes we need to manipulate the data to display it in a different format. So we need to be sure that whatever property we want to access is there and has the correct format. So for this, we want to build a model, a schema, a class, anything that will hold the data in place. And we want to be sure that the data we are collecting and reading has the specific format. So first, we want to use types to do things properly. So let's say you're manipulating a string, you want the type of the property to be string. You're manipulating a date, you want it to be maybe a date, but maybe it's something else. So let's say you want to store the birth date of one of your users. So for example, John is born on January 17th, 1990. In that case, you could store the date as a timestamp, as a string, as a number, as a date, whatever you feel like, depending on your constraint. There's multiple solutions, and you have to choose one to store your data. But then, it's not the end. You're not only collecting data, you need to use it. So maybe you need to format the birth date to show the user's age. So for instance, John is 33 years old, which is deriving the age from the initial data, which was the birth date. And then, let's say you're building an e-commerce application that allows users to buy alcohol. Then you need to be sure that John is over 18 years old. So you need to process the birth date, take the age, and check if the business logic match what you want to do. So we need to do some validation. So we can do it in the front end, where the user will be inputting his age, his birth date. But we don't want to be only trusting the front end, because someone might be trying to get past this validation. So we need to validate again on the server, which means we need to do the same sort of validation twice at two different places. And then maybe when you're storing that data, you have some limitation. So maybe you have a database which is limiting one of your options. Let's say you want to store text, and you have a limited amount of characters that you can store. So maybe you'll have another set of validation on the database. So let's try to build some validation using native stuff. So by native, because I'm talking about web application, I'll be focusing on forms, web forms, and we can start with something called HTML validation. So if you look at Mozilla Developer Network, they have a small definition for client-side validation, which is the validation we do on the front end. And client-side validation is important because you want to be sure that the user inputs are properly filled. All the required fields have been filled by the user, and they're matching a specific format that you want. If you want to collect a number, you want the user to enter only numbers, not text. So for this, we can use, technical issues. Is the screen sharing off?
It's off. Oh no, I'm so sorry. Help? No, wait. I think it's the other room. I think the other room is pressing. Is it? Yeah. I think it should be one of the other rooms. They should have touched.
Okay, bear with me. Sorry, I don't know any jokes. Sorry.
So you can paint it without mind's eye. So go ahead.
The screen control needs user validation.
I'm so sorry. Track 2 is touching the thing, so I'm not sure what to do. You have to have the slides, right?
Yeah.
You know what? Just pause the time for a second. We're so sorry. We're so sorry. I mean, I'm guessing like this makes you wake up earlier, right? What time is it? It's 11. You know what? What are you guys doing right now?
Having coffee.
That's great.
Waiting for coffee.
Oh, waiting for
You know what? The coffee is gonna come soon. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
This has never happened before.
It happened to me before.
Oh, really?
That must be good.
I'll say I can't let you do that.
So what's Zod actually? It's like a final library?
Yeah, not only frameworks, like JavaScript.
So you can use it throughout like the entire node.
Yeah. You can use it on the back end.
So I'm just gonna wait for the next. I'm gonna touch. I feel like if I touch next one, it's gonna get affected as well. So how's the day?
So far, so good.
It's great.
I was afraid I was going to be shot on time.
No worries. We're just gonna give you as much time as possible. We're gonna push things forward.
Then you just come back and then you go to the side and you skip
Yeah, but the issue is that I have like a third of the presentation is live coding. So if I can show the code inside, any other
We did touch everything.
just click the
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
At least for this if you want
The other side. The other side. Actually, the other room now is this one. The other room is
We're back. We're almost back.
Thomas, you want me now?
Okay.
But you can go ahead.
Okay, so let's start again. So we can use, for validation, we can use native HTML attributes. So let's say you have inputs that you want your user to fill and you don't want to leave a blank. Then you can use the required attribute. This means that the field cannot be blank. Then you can control the length of the string you want your input to your user to enter. Or you can use min and max if you have numbers. You can have types if you want to ask for a date instead of text, or a number, or something else. And lastly, we have pattern, which means you can use regular expression. So you can test for more complex scenarios. But then you have to deal with regular expression, which is not so good. So I'm going to go with a quick demo. So I have a very small application that should be appearing on your screen in a few seconds, hopefully. Okay, more technical issues, sorry. share my entire screen, and I'll be back. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. So here I have a small application. It's basically just a register form. So we are expecting a user email, a user password, so user can come back to this later on. And then we submit the form. And boom, you register to next year's GeekCamp. So it's a very simple form, just to show you how we can build validation. So here the main issue is that we don't have any validation. So all those two fields are blank, and I can still submit. So the user doesn't even know he forgot to fill something. So the code is written in React. So I have a small form with a submit handler and two inputs, an email input and a password input. And that's it. For the backend, I have let's say a fake endpoint. So I hope it's clear enough. Maybe the contrast is not so good. Should I change it to light mode, or can you read on screen? Is it big enough? Light mode. Okay, I'll try. So. And I'll try with something clear. Is it better this way? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So the backend endpoint is really like a dummy endpoint. So I'm just not even reading the request. I'm just sending a 201 whenever I get the answer, just to emulate a backend here. Basically, this is where you would maybe process the request, store it in database, whatever. So what we want to do first is make those two fields as required field. So I can start by adding the required attribute. And then I can do the same for the password text. So required as well. And then, so if we try now to submit, we have a nice error message from Google Chrome, Firefox, whatever, that says you need to fill this out. So the user is actually aware that he forgot to fill something. So I'm just gonna write some gibberish and do the same for the password. And still, I get the same error message, which is nice because as a user, you know that you're doing something wrong and you're giving answers to how you can solve the problem. So I'm just gonna write some gibberish here as well, and I can still like submit the form. So it's not ideal because we still expect an email, and hopefully we want to have a password that is behaving as a password. So what we can do is we can change the email input and change the type. So the type attribute was one I mentioned earlier, and here we can ask for an email. So by doing so, when we submit, so we still have the required validation first. So if I try to input something, then same, I get an error message telling me, oh, this is probably not a valid email address. You should probably do something. And then you get more information. Oh, this still doesn't look like an email. And then you can go through and continue to the next validation error. So type is not only meant for email. You can use it for things like number. And in that case, you get these nice little arrows. But keep in mind that you can still write something like this, because this is still a number. So be careful when you use the type number. For this instance, I want to use password. Password is nice because you get automatic, you get the automatic hidden field, and you also get like the suggest box from. Oh, I probably need to reload. Oh, this is a guest mode. So if you right-click on the password field, Chrome can suggest password to you as well, which is nice. So now we are able to input emails. We have a required password field. Maybe we want to have something a bit more complex for the password. So we can use something like pattern. And for pattern, so I have a small password pattern here. So this is to check, so this is a regular expression, so this is absolutely disgusting. But we want to check that the password has at least a lowercase character, at least an uppercase character, at least a number, and one of those special characters. So it's a bit hard to read, but it will get the job done. And if we go back to the pattern here, maybe we can give some hint as well. So we can write some text to help the user out. So now if I go back, I input some email address, then the password is required, type some letter, and then I get this message. You need to match a specific format. So you need to have at least one character, one lowercase, uppercase, and so on. So we did make some validation, right? Even if I type and match all the pattern, then I can submit. So I get some validation. It's a bit inconvenient because you have to deal with regex, and it's not really flexible to build complex use case, but still, it gets the job done. So pros and cons of native validation. You don't need anything. It's simple, plain HTML. The API is pretty simple. You have like 7 attributes to memorize. And in terms of accessibility, so one nice thing I forgot to mention here, when we submit the field, we get the focus on the first field that has an error, which is pretty nice from an accessibility perspective. And if you're using a screen reader, because this is HTML, the screen reader will be able to pick up the hint and tell the user this field is required. So accessibility-wise, it's pretty good, but it's limited. Even adding some validation to the password is a bit complex with regular expression. It's hard to maintain, and if you want to have like more complex use case, it's going to be very, very difficult to implement. The difficulty is this is only meant for client side, so we don't do anything on the backend. So if I'm sending a bad payload to my backend, I still have to validate it somehow. And in terms of safety, so basically I don't have anything. I'm still manipulating strings. So type safety-wise, not good. So maybe we can try to move on and build something with JavaScript this time. We are already reading the inputs when we submit the form. So maybe we can use JavaScript to implement validation and implement our business logic. Then, if the data we are reading from the form is invalid, we can just abort the submission. And if everything is OK, we can continue. So let's go back here and let's write some JavaScript or TypeScript. So first thing I want to do, right, is define a type. So I will define a type. Sorry, I only have one n, so I'm going to use abbreviation here. This is my sign-up form, and I want to have an email. And this email is going to be a string. Maybe I'll just put down the mic for a sec. And then I have a password. Oh, thank you. So I have a password field. And this password will be a string as well. So this sign-up type, I use it to lie to TypeScript, basically. I have a function that gets all the value from the form. And this is an unknown type, because I don't know what's inside my form. I can only make assumptions. So what I will do is I will lie to TypeScript first, and then I will use the form values to read the email. So I can have an email, it's a string, but it's optional. So I have to test whether or not I have some value here. And if I don't have values, then I want to return and stop the execution. I can do the same thing for the password field. So form value.password. And if I don't have anything, then I will return. So, thank you. So here the thing is, I still have the HTML validation. So I still get this message. And I don't want it anymore. I want to use only the JavaScript validation. So the first thing I can do is go back to my form and ask the HTML to not validate the form. So I can use no validate, which means don't use the HTML validation. Or you can remove the required attribute, or you could keep it for accessibility purpose, or you could switch it to ARIA required instead. So I'll keep one as ARIA required and the second one as required. Pattern and password, we can remove it, we won't use it anymore. And now if I go back here and I try to submit, nothing happens because I'm returning early. I don't have an email, so the JavaScript will return here. So this is not so good because right now the user has no way of knowing what's wrong. So we need to add some information. So I can add, let's say, a nice message. So email is required. So I'm sorry, I'm gonna maybe shorten my error message. Still, you'll get the point. And sorry for the typo. So let's say email is required. Now if I submit, I can display the message. So I have a state management here to all this value. And whenever I edit the email field, right, I want to remove this error. Oops. So inputting something, the error is gone, and I can move on. So this is only to check whether or not the email is present, but I need to do the same thing for the password. So here I'm going to do the same thing and set an error message. Okay, and now I have the error message for the password, so I need to say password is required. Okay, the issue is, so first of all, I don't have any accessibility built in, right? I don't have the focus back into the field. This is added into the DOM, but I still need to wire everything for screen reader to be able to pick it up, saying this field, this error message is tied to this user input. And I only get the validation for one field at a time. So I need to update this logic to be able to pick up all my business logic, validate all the fields one by one, and then I should abort the execution of the handle submit. So this is a bit cumbersome because I have to check every single field and then continue the execution until I reach the end of my validation. I only have two fields here. Just imagine a big fat form with like, I don't know, 15 or 50 field to fill. It's a bit cumbersome, and whenever I want to use this object, right, the sign up model that I created earlier, I need to redo those checks every time because this SI, right, it has an email but could be undefined, I don't know. And this password same. And if I want to apply some rule like check whether or not this password pattern is applied, I need to rerun everything every time I want to use my object. Because here the type safety I have here, it's a lie. I'm telling TypeScript, trust me, this should have the correct shape. And then I manage to validating by checking if every single property is there and if every single property is matching my business rule. So it's a bit cumbersome, and I have to do all the wiring, and this is only done on the front end, but then I can copy paste everything here on my back end, so whenever I submit a request, right? So here I have a small HTTP code 201 whenever I'm submitting, but what I want is actually to send an error whenever something is wrong. So I need to duplicate this logic here. So you could do the abstraction, create a nice little external library for it, but it's going to be complex to maintain because at every single time you need to use this object, you will have to do those checks. So pros of this solution, it's just JavaScript. You don't have to add external libraries, so it's, I would say, easy to set up. You can implement complex code because you have access to JavaScript, so you can do whatever you want. And you can reuse those code in the backend as well. So this time, not only limited to client side, but you can reuse on the backend. The structure might be a bit complex depending on how you build things. So let's say you have an external library, you still need to do the checks every time you want to access a property, which is not really convenient. And in terms of accessibility, you have to do the wiring yourself. For the type safety, so you can probably have something that is a bit more safe than what I did. I decided to lie to TypeScript on purpose to show how bad things can be. But maybe you can be a bit more clever than what I just did. So now let's move on to Zod. Zod is a TypeScript first schema validation. So basically you're defining the schema in TypeScript, and then you can extract and reuse the type, I would say, without having to define the type itself. You define the structure of your object. So you have access to types, which is basically a mapping from what you would do with TypeScript. So Zod has a bunch of built-in types, so string, number, boolean, the usual stuff. But each of these objects has validation methods that are built in and maintained by Zod. So let's say for string, you can check the length of a string. You can check whether or not it's a valid email, it's a valid URL, a valid IP. You can apply a regular expression. You have a lot of building stuff that you can do. And you can build your own model. So here, let's say I have a nested model, which is a string. And then I apply the array transformer, which means I'm expecting an array of string. And then I'm building a model, which is an object with two nested props. So the first one is list prop, which is based on my initial nested model. So here, list prop will be a list of array. And the second prop will be a number. And I'm applying a custom validation rule. So I will only accept numbers that are more than 10. So you can use the built-in method, or you can write your own logic using the refine operator. Then once you have your model, you can extract the type. You don't have to rewrite the type. You can use z.infer, which is provided by Zod, and you can automatically build the type, extract the type from the model you created with Zod. The idea behind Zod is to parse a piece of data. You parse it once, Zod will do all the validation, ensure that everything is filled out correctly, every business code is being applied to each field, and then everywhere you want to access a field using this object, you have type safety, and the rules are enforced. So Zod, as you saw, was just a TypeScript library. You can use it on the front end, but you also can use it on the back end. It's not limited to web forms. You can use it for validation. Let's say you're reading from a file. You know roughly what the shape of the object is, but you want to be sure that it still has the correct format and that nobody has messed up with the file. You're reading a .env file. You want to be sure that every single property has been filled out. You're reading arguments from the CLI. You can check whether or not the user has provided everything and if everything has the correct format. So it's not only for web form, it's for all things validation in JavaScript or TypeScript. So a small demo using Zod. What we will start with is we'll start to build our own model first. So I have a model here, so I will call it Zod model maybe. Okay, thank you. So I will import Zod first, and then I can create an object, and this object will have an email, and this email will be a string with a minimum length because I want it to be required, right? So I can input my own custom message, and then I want it to be an email. If not, I can say email is invalid. And then same for the password. So we'll do z.string again. We'll reuse this. Saying it's required, so I want the same error message. And then I want to apply a regular expression. I can use my pattern, the previous pattern that we used earlier. And I will just add a custom error message. So let's say it's too easy. Then, because I need a regular expression, I will just convert it. So it was a string, I need a regular expression, so I will just format it properly. And then we have our Zod model. So we can extract the type, so I will reuse the same name and do z.infer type of Zod model. Then here, instead of using this little lie, what I will do is I will get the result of the parsing, and I will do a safe parse. And I will read the form values. Oops, form values. So what I'm doing here is basically I'm reading the form. I don't know the expected format. So this could be any unknown, whatever. And I get as a result something that Zod will tell me whether or not I can parse this and apply all the business rules. So this result, then I have a success that I can check, and if it's not success, then what I want is I want to return. If I have succeeded in parsing my Zod model, then what I can do is I can access the data. So I can send the data here. I don't need all this validation, oops. And what I need is just to set the email error. So I will just do the email error because it's easier for me. But you can do the same thing for the password. So you can go through all the error and find one error that is the one for the email. So you need to go through a few things to collect this information, but in the end, we'll manage to get the email error. So email, and then dot message. So here I'm no longer lying to TypeScript. I'm getting this value, which is unknown. I'm parsing it using the Zod model, and if I don't succeed in parsing, then I can display the error. Should be this, right? Am I missing something? Oh, sorry. So path is an array, so I need to include, sorry. And this should be good. So I removed all the previous validation we had in JavaScript. So now if I submit, I have the required. If I input something, right, the field is still clear, and I still get the error message, email is invalid. So this error comes from Zod. So this is the message we wrote, right? And I can do the same thing for the password. And everything is handled by Zod here. So Zod is doing all the validation based on the rule we define. We don't need to check those, we just need to collect the error somehow. So it's good because this Zod model, right? I've done it on the front end. I can extract it into a library, and I can import it in my backend, because my backend is also written in TypeScript or JavaScript. But you have one set of rules that you can maintain and use both on the front end and back end. You can implement complex rules. So I've used a built-in solution here to check whether it's an email, but you can implement your own validation rules. Zod is pretty flexible. And you have type safety, because this time we are no longer lying to TypeScript. We are parsing and then getting a specific model. So it's no longer free, you have to pay for it, so you have to install an external dependency, but it's, I would say, pretty worth it. And if you don't want to add 13 kilobytes, then you have alternative solutions that are lighter, but I would say less powerful. In terms of accessibility, it's still not good, right? I still don't get the automatic focus. I still need to wire everything, so I would say that still some manual work. And the integration, I would say, depends on your project. Here it's pretty straightforward because I don't have a lot going on, but it still could be easier. So I want to talk about forms, because right now I'm doing everything manually. I have to do the validation, display the error message, but I want to simplify things. So I want to use something that manages the state form. And this is where something like React hook forms come in. The goal here is to avoid the hassle of having to do the checks yourself. So when I submit something, I need to parse the body of my form. I need to retrieve the fields. I need to then send it to Zod. Zod gives me back the error, and then I need to read the error and set it back into my DOM, so user can have the information. And with React hook form, everything is basically done for you. So what you do is you use the use form hook, and React hook form will give you a few things. So it will give you the form state, whether or not your form is invalid or valid. It will give you a submit handler to take care of the validation or not of the form. and a register method that allows you to tell React hook form which fields you want to use. So small demo, I don't know how I'm doing time-wise.
What's the timeline?
Sorry, the time, still have time. 30 minutes, so 12 minutes.
Okay. So I'm more than enough time. So what I want to do here is get rid of this part, right? This is a manual part that I will be doing on and on. Yeah, thank you. So what we will do here is we want to use something new. So I will use something from React form, which is use form. So this use form, right, it comes with something called a resolver. And this resolver is actually meant to wire a validation library. So you have access to multiple ones. I'm going to use the Zod resolver because we are using Zod. And I'm going to pass in my model, which is Zod model. So here what I have is I declare that I'm going to be using a form and I want to apply this validation. And in return, I will get this type, the Zod model that I created, which means that this would be all the properties that I can use to wire my form. So I will access to register, I will access to handle submit, so I will rename it because I already have a handle submit. And I have a form state, and in this form state I want to access the errors. So let's save. Okay, so a few things I need to do first. I need to register all the inputs. So if I go back here, so this is my email input, and in React form you need to do this little spread of the register function. And the good thing here, because I have all the TypeScript set up properly, I get auto-completion here, if I do it correctly. And I can only register the fields that my model has. So you can have more inputs, but Zod is not going to read them. So here I want to register the email, and I can remove the name. And same thing with the password. So again, I can register the password. I have the TypeScript helping me here. And once I have this, I need to do a few things. I need to wrap the handle submit with my function React hook form, and I need to update the signature. So I'm no longer receiving a form element here. I'm directly receiving my Zod model. So I'm going to call this one data. Sorry for the naming. I don't need to prevent the event from submitting. I don't need to get the form value. I don't need to parse the model because the React hook form did it for me in the handle submit. So what I have here, I don't even need to manage the error state because it's done in the form state here. The only thing I need to do is submit my data. And this function will not be called if this first wrapper React hook form is not succeeding at validating the form. So basically, I don't need to undo the validation logic. This hook is doing all the validation logic by using this Zod resolver. Then I need to wire the errors because React hook form is managing the errors for me, but I still need to display it to the user. So here what I can do is I can read from the error and save. I have access to something that is type safe. I can only access the errors that I declare in my model. So here I can do errors.email, and if I have an error, then I can display it. So I can access message. And this is the error message that is tied to my email input. I can do the same thing for the password. So password here, same. I get the auto-completion because this is type safe. And password. Thank you. So what do I need to do next? I have everything I want. React hook form is managing the parsing validation of my model using the resolver. Zod is actually handling the business logic, the rules that I want to enforce. And I don't need to deal with this kind of wiring myself. So if I want to submit the form now, I get the error message, but I also got back the focus, because this is what React to form does. It manages the focus and the state of your form. So remember, I told you that we need to wire everything for accessibility. This is one of the things that you get for free with React to form. And now, if I want to type in, so remember, I have this state management to clear the error whenever I type something. Here, I can remove this because I no longer use it. And this password error is no longer used as well. So going back to my form, I get the error message, and if I type something, my form gets revalidated. So here I got the message, email is invalid, because React to form is managing the state of my form. So whenever I key in something, the validation is run again. And then, as long as the email is invalid, then React to form will try to revalidate, reparse everything, until I get the form correct. So from a user experience perspective, it's quite good. I get short loop feedback. And let's say I want to type in something, the password is still too easy, I need to write some complex password, and then I can submit. So here I'm finally done with using Zod, having something that is type safe, right? I can, if I try to update this property, right, and do something else, TypeScript will at some point yell to me that this IOI is not part of the form. And if I try to hit the right keyboard shortcut, right, I can only register fields that are part of my model. Same for the error, right? I cannot access something that is not part of this error. I can only have email or password, because this is what I declared in my model. Sorry, this one was password.
Quick question. How do you keep your Zod model in sync with your data model, or is your Zod model?
Yeah, so in that case, instead of having a type or anything, you're using the Zod model as your model. This is the type that you can use. So thanks to type inference, this is generated for you. But what you want to do is, the shape of your data is going to be your Zod model. And you're going to have your all the business rules that you want to apply are going to be tied to that model. So if you want, you can maintain two separate models, one for the shape and one for the business logic. But I wouldn't recommend it. It's best if you...
So your Zod model is your data model?
Yeah. In that case, yes. So this is good because we have everything managed for us. And since I only have 5 minutes left, I'm not going to do the whole demonstration, but if I extract this in an external library, or just I want to copy-paste this model, right? And I can put it here, because this is JavaScript, TypeScript, and I can do the validation. I can read the request, and then send a processing error whenever someone tries to submit something that is bad. So let's say, instead of accepting a payload without an email, I can send a HTTP error saying, you submitted something that is not properly formatted, you need to fix it. And I can send the list of errors to the front end, and then the front end can wire it, do the mapping again.
So Zod has view functions as well?
Sorry?
Zod has view manipulation functions as well?
No. You will need to do the wiring back on the front end. But still, you can get the same. You can reuse the same model on your backend and have the same set of custom rules. You don't have to deal with two sets of rules on the front end and the backend. And that's it for me. Sorry for the small technical issues. If you have any question about Zod or React to Form, feel free to find me later on.